Hey everybody, welcome back for another deep dive. This time, we're going to be taking a look at the allegations against Sean Diddy Combs.
Oh, yeah, this is a big one.
It is. And, it's based on a press conference that was held by a law firm representing over 100 alleged victims. And, it's intense.
I've heard about this.
Yeah. Some of these accusations, they involve alleged events that happened when some of the victims were as young as 9 years old. So before we even get into it, I just want to say, we are sticking to the facts here. We're going to present everything that was in that press conference. No taking sides, no opinions, just a presentation of the information, all right?
Right. Sounds good to me.
Okay, cool. So to get started, there's this law firm, and they're holding this press conference about these allegations against Diddy. And they're saying this could be the biggest case they've ever handled.
Wow. That's a big statement coming from them.
Right. They must have seen some stuff.
Right. They're not new to high-profile cases.
Exactly. And it's not just a couple of incidents here. We're talking 120 individuals represented by the firm with over 3,285 people contacting them with their own stories.
Whoa. That's a lot.
Right. That's a lot of people. So you got to think, how do you even begin to investigate something like that?
Yeah. Especially when some of these accusations go back decades.
Yeah.
Right? It's going to be a massive undertaking to try and, sort through all that and actually build a case.
And to think about all of the potential evidence, how are they gonna deal with all that?
Yeah, and think about the people involved.
Mm-hmm.
To track down witnesses from that long ago, and even just dealing with memories.
Yeah.
Right? That's a long time.
Oh, yeah. Memories get hazy. But, this law firm seems serious about this.
Yeah.
They've got a former detective working with them, helping them to go through everything.
That makes sense.
Yeah. To sort through all those claims and, vet them, Make sure they're credible.
Yeah. That makes sense, especially with a case like this where you have so many people coming forward.
Yeah.
You want to be extra careful.
Yeah. And they were very clear, too, that they believe the alleged victims.
Right.
And they seem ready for a fight, They know there's going to be pushback, but they're committed to, exposing what they call these silent accomplices and the enablers.
Wow. It's they're going after a whole system.
Yeah.
Not just Diddy himself.
Right. They're basically saying that, this isn't just about Diddy. It's about a potential network of people who might have known what was going on and, didn't do anything.
If that's true, it really does paint a whole different picture, the culture of abuse almost.
Right. It's like a conspiracy.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's get into who these alleged victims are. It's actually a pretty diverse group. 60 men, 60 women, all different racial backgrounds, and from all over the country, 25 states.
Wow. That's really widespread.
Yeah. And 25 of those 120 people were minors at the time of the alleged events.
Yeah.
We're not just talking adults here.
That's heavy.
And some of these allegations go all the way back to 1991.
That's a really long time.
It is. That's over 30 years.
Yeah. And it makes you think, why now?
Yeah, why are people just now coming forward?
Right. Why is it taking so long for these allegations to surface?
Well, the lawyers kind of address that, saying that some states actually have laws that allow people to bring these types of claims even after so much time has passed.
Oh, interesting.
Because of how difficult it can be to come forward.
Especially in a case like this.
Yeah.
Right? We're talking about Diddy. He's huge.
He is. He's a big name.
To go up against someone like that, it takes a lot of courage.
It does. To potentially face that backlash, maybe ruin your career. And for some people, even just to relive that trauma, it's gotta be hard.
It's gotta be incredibly difficult.
Yeah. So let's get into some of the details of the allegations. Where did this stuff allegedly happen?
Okay, yeah, let's hear it.
Well, the lawyers focused on 3 main spots: New York, California, and Florida. And they mentioned these alleged incidents happening at parties, private residences, and even hotels.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and they kept mentioning these puppy parties.
A puppy party. What is that?
I don't know. They didn't really elaborate on it, so...
Oh, come on.
I know. I'm dying to know. But they did talk about what they called a common MO, a pattern of behavior they saw in a lot of these allegations.
Okay, what was it?
Allegedly involving drug, drinks, and coercion. A lot of times with promises of career advancement, too.
It's that classic power dynamic, right?
Totally.
Where someone uses their influence to manipulate people, especially when they're vulnerable and looking for a break.
And it gets worse. The lawyer was saying that if people refused to drink these drinks, they got kicked out of the parties.
Whoa, that's messed up. Almost forcing people to participate.
Right. And they talked about this drug called xylazine.
What's that?
It's actually a horse tranquilizer, believe it or not.
Whoa, really? A horse tranquilizer.
Yeah, and it was allegedly found in multiple victims' systems.
That's scary. I mean,
Yeah.
that's not just getting someone drunk. That's a whole other level.
Right. So this case is about way more than just the legal stuff. It's got this whole cultural aspect to it,
Hmm.
and the press conference, like it featured a lot of powerful statements from victim advocates about, the culture of silence around abuse, like how hard it is for victims to come forward and all that.
Yeah, it makes you think about the bigger picture. Like, how does our culture contribute to these kinds of situations?
Exactly.
And how can we change it?
Yeah. So one of the advocates, Carrie Paul, she's a national victim advocate, and she was talking about how, like, our culture just doesn't believe victims a lot of the time.
Yeah, that's sadly true.
Yeah. And about how abusers seek out vulnerable people and how, like, it's never the victim's fault.
That's so important to remember. It's never the victim's fault.
Right. She also talked about, like, how hard it is to get justice sometimes, like how hard it is to navigate the legal system and how a lot of times it's just not set up to really help victims.
Yeah. The system can be pretty intimidating, especially for someone who's already been through something traumatic.
Yeah. And another advocate, Andrew Van Arsdale, he talked about the impact of Diddy's recent indictment and how, it like validated the feelings of a lot of the alleged
Yeah,
victims.
I bet that was huge for them.
Yeah, to finally feel seen and heard.
Like someone finally believes them.
Yeah. And then Olivia Rivers from the Texas Association Against Sexual Assault, she shared some statistics about just how common sexual assault is, like how widespread the problem really is.
Yeah, those statistics are always shocking.
They are, and they just make you realize like how much work we still have to do to address this, like victim blaming and silencing. It's still such a huge problem.
It is. It really makes you wonder how many people are out there suffering in silence because they're afraid to speak up.
Right. And then to really show the kinds of claims they're dealing with, the lawyers shared a few anonymized accounts from some of the alleged victims.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like just little snippets of their stories.
Yeah.
Like for example, there's a story of a 9-year-old who was taken to a Bad Boy Records audition.
Oh, my gosh. That's awful.
Yeah, and a pregnant woman who like blacked out and woke up injured.
That's disturbing.
Yeah, it was really heavy stuff.
Yeah. It's hard to even imagine what those people have been through.
Yeah. So at the end of the press conference, the lawyers, they urged anyone with information to come forward. They really emphasized the confidentiality thing too.
I bet that's important.
Yeah, like to make people feel safe. And they were very clear that this is just the beginning. Like they're determined to expose, as they said, complicit bystanders and the facilitators of foul play.
Wow. So they're not holding back. They're going after anyone who might have been involved.
Nope. And I think
Okay.
that's a good place to stop for now.
Okay. It's important to remember, too, that this is like just one side of the story, right?
That's right. We haven't heard Diddy's side yet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the legal process, like, it's going to take a while to play out.
Oh, yeah. This is far from over.
Right. But that doesn't mean we can't talk about it.
Totally. Like, I think it's important to have these conversations,
Yeah.
even if they're uncomfortable.
Right. To, like, raise awareness and learn from this whole situation.
Exactly. And to understand, like, the human impact of all of this.
Right. Like, these aren't just headlines.
Yeah.
These are real people whose lives have been affected by these allegations.
Right. And one quotes from the alleged victims that really stuck with me was, had he not been in power, I feel like I could have been something great. I quit the industry because of what Sean Combs did to me.
Wow. That's powerful.
It is. And
Yeah.
it just shows, like, how much damage abuse can do.
Yeah. It's not just about the incident itself. It's about the lasting impact it can have on a person's life, their career, their dreams.
And, their mental health.
Oh, absolutely. The trauma, like that can stay with someone for years.
It's not something you just get over.
Right. And it's not just the victims who are affected either. Like their families, their friends.
Yeah, it ripples outward.
Exactly.
So this whole case, it really brings to light the power imbalances that exist in a lot of industries.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially like the music business.
Oh, yeah.
Like you've got all these aspiring artists who are so desperate to make it.
Right. They're willing to do almost anything for a chance.
Yeah, and that can make them vulnerable to exploitation.
Absolutely. And someone like Diddy, with all his power and influence,
Yeah.
he could easily take advantage of that.
And that's what's so messed up about this whole thing.
Right. Like, it's a betrayal of trust.
It is.
and a reminder that power can corrupt, even someone who seems to have it all.
Speaking of power, I was really struck by how the lawyers kept emphasizing corporate accountability.
Oh, yeah, they were going after the whole system.
They were pointing fingers at banks, pharmaceutical companies, hotels.
Wow.
Like, they were saying that entire organizations could be complicit in this.
That's a bold statement.
It is. But it makes you think, like, maybe it's not just one bad apple, you know?
Right. Maybe it's the whole barrel.
Exactly. Maybe it's a culture that allowed this to happen.
Right. Like a culture of looking the other way.
And that's why the lawyers are so determined to expose what they call the enablers and the facilitators.
The people who knew but didn't do anything.
Right. Or who actively covered it up.
That's scary to think about.
It is. And it's a reminder that we all have a responsibility to speak up against injustice, you know?
Yeah.
We can't just stay silent.
Silence is complicity.
Exactly. And it just allows this kind of behavior to continue.
Right. Like we have to be willing to challenge those in power, to hold them accountable for their actions.
It's about creating a culture where abuse isn't tolerated.
Right. A culture where victims feel safe to come forward and where they know they'll be believed and supported.
And that's going to require a lot of work, you know?
Oh, for sure. This isn't something that's going to change overnight.
No, but it's something we have to keep talking about, keep working towards.
Absolutely.
Right.
Like this case, it's just the tip of the iceberg, really.
It is. There are probably so many stories out there that we haven't even heard yet.
Yeah. And it makes you wonder, like, what can we do to prevent this from happening in the future?
Right. What can we learn from this?
Yeah. How can we create a better, safer world for everyone? I think what's really striking about this whole thing is just how widespread this problem seems to be.
Right. Like, it's not just Diddy. It's not just the music industry.
Exactly. Like, this case has really opened up a Pandora's box of issues about power, abuse, and complicity.
It has. And it's made me think a lot about, like, what can we do to change things?
Yeah. Like, how do we create a world where these kinds of things don't happen?
Right. What are the solutions here?
Well, I think it starts with awareness. Like, we need to educate ourselves about the dynamics of abuse, the red flags to watch out for.
Yeah. So we can recognize it when we see it.
Exactly. And we need to be willing to challenge our own biases, you know?
Oh, yeah. Like, we all have biases.
We do.
Yeah.
And sometimes those biases can make us blind to what's really going on.
Like, we might think, oh, he's famous. He would never do something like that.
Right. Or she seems so confident she wouldn't let someone take advantage of her.
But the truth is, anyone can be a victim of abuse.
Exactly. And anyone can be an abuser. Power and fame don't make you immune to that.
Right. And I think it's also important to remember that abuse doesn't always look the same.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It can be really subtle sometimes.
Yeah. It's not always physical violence. It can be emotional manipulation, financial control, even just like constant put downs.
Right. And a lot of times abusers are really good at making their victims feel like it's their own fault.
Yeah. Like they make them question their own reality.
Exactly. So it's important to trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is.
And to believe survivors.
Yes, like that's so important.
When someone comes forward with their story, we need to listen with empathy and without judgment.
Because coming forward is already such a huge step.
It is.
Like it takes so much courage to speak out about abuse.
And sometimes it feels like the system is working against you, you know?
Oh yeah, it can be really discouraging.
Like you finally get the courage to come forward, and then you're met with disbelief or even blame.
Yeah, that's why it's so important for us to be supportive.
Yeah, to create a space where survivors feel safe and believed.
Right. And that's on all of us. It's not just the responsibility of law enforcement or the courts.
It's a cultural shift that needs to happen.
Totally. Like, we need to change the way we talk about abuse, the way we think about it.
Yeah. We need to stop blaming victims and start holding abusers accountable.
And that means speaking up, even when it's uncomfortable.
Right. Like if you see something that seems wrong, don't just ignore it.
Say something. Do something.
Even if it's just checking in with the person who seems to be in trouble.
Exactly. Like any action, big or small, can make a difference.
And sometimes that small action can be the thing that helps someone get out of a dangerous situation.
Totally. It's about looking out for each other.
And building a world where everyone feels safe and respected.
That's the goal.
And that's a good place to wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everybody.
If you're interested in learning more about this case or about resources for survivors of abuse, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, you're not alone. There is help available.